It's week 2 of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan draft format, and you're wanting to get crafty? We've got artifacts for that.
Welcome to the MTG Rebellion. I'm FourStar, your lead drafter. Let's take a quick look at the draft metagame going into week 2 of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So here, there's not much change, actually none, to be honest with you. Unfortunately, I think this draft format has hammered itself out as what tiers are where. There could be some wild, wacky new thing that we haven't found yet, but so far people haven't chosen to get crafty, pardon the pun, to try anything new. So the decks are pretty much established. So again, is it Treasure? I think is the best. Azorius Craft is probably number 2. Grilled Dinos is still in the top tier, and the rest of them are pretty much the same mid-range piles and stuff like that. A lot of the black-based decks are not performing as well as you think they would, so there's a possibility that one of those might slip down into the bottom tier here soon.
Fair enough. Well, I'll tell you what, let's put a minute on the clock and let's talk about the general rules of Azorius Craft macaroni and cheese.
All right. So again, with Azorius Craft here, really the early drops are going to blunt your early attacks, but a general rule with this is the later the game goes, the better it is for you. You want to be able to draft your deck where you're playing cards every turn, developing your board, hitting your land drops in the first 5 or 6 turns really is at a premium here because you need to be able to craft on time. Otherwise, you can fall behind. You have to be able to turn the corner. The removal suite, which we'll touch on later, is a little bit to be desired in white and blue. You don't really kill things, you nullify things. You pacify them, you bounce them, you tap them. So you have to be very judicious about when you use them and what you use them on. Counter spells, unfortunately, are a necessity in this format because you don't really have any other ways to outright deal with a lot of the bombs. And some of the bombs, like the Dracosaur, pacifying it does nothing. You will still lose to the card advantage that it just spews every other turn.
So when we look at Azorius Craft as an archetype, do we see any inevitability issues when we're going up against other archetypes? Because as I see here, we're looking to play cards every turn. We want the game to go longer, but do we have issues where they have inevitability and we're playing like we do when we don't?
Outside of their bombs or hitting more than one of the bombs, as I mentioned before, there really isn't a problem with going long. We're going to be favored in most cases because we're going to be able to draw more cards, get more value than they are. But sometimes you just get buried under the bombs. If your opponent has 4 or 5 bombs and you just don't have the tempo to beat them with it, you're going to probably lose. But you take those in any kind of limited game.
So is this more of an archetype where your general card parity is higher the longer the game goes? But again, if somebody just happens to hit that nut draft, this is the archetype that's going to fold to it?
As will a lot in this format, to be honest with you, because the removal spells are far and few between that are actually good, and the bombs are game enders, a lot of them, if they don't get dealt with immediately. So you're not really in any other different boat than any other deck in the format. You just have harder ways to actually kill things.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, looking at Azorius Craft, we're going to start by going over the commons, and I think we have a top 10 list for you here. FourStar, walk us through it.
You bet. So commons here, these things are just about generating value. These things are all amazing to have early, and you can get value at them later by bouncing them or things like that, or crafting them with things. Tinker's Tote does everything. This thing is 3 artifacts in one, and it even can gain life on the way out. I've had a lot of limited games here where you play it early, you can bounce it later with the 3/1 dog and just get value out of it, or you can have this thing trigger several artifact enter the battlefield abilities, or it pairs extremely well with the card right after it, Adaptive Gem Guard. Pardon me, this card can tap itself. Everyone remember this. You have to do it sorcery speed, but you can actually tap this the turn it comes in to pump itself with something else. So if you're able to go Tinker's Toad on 3, Gem Guard on 4, you've got 4 artifacts, you can make this a 5/5. And if you're not already under pressure, this thing can be a 5/5/7/7/9/9. This thing can just take over the game. Destruction Hammer, disenchant effects, as we mentioned in the past episode, are very good in this format. A lot of the bombs are artifact or enchantment based. You have to be able to remove them. So normally we're not in the scimitar equipment range, but this thing with the additional disenchant ability on it actually gives it a lot more value. 1/1 flyers, you'll see a lot in this video because a lot of these things just come down early and they wear explore map tokens or just explore abilities in general very, very well. And because the removal is so far and few between, they don't want to waste an earlier abrade on something like this. So it taxes the early removal so your artifacts stay later. Pacifism, this is just power crept. This is the best pacifism has ever been. It stops everything, even activated abilities. The only thing this doesn't work on is the big dragon. Cogwork Wrestler is very, very good because you can actually win combat with this. In the last Lord of the Rings format, a lot of the -3 effects were used very, very well. Iceberg is one of the cards you play early and turns into a 6/6 late, can actually swing a game backwards. Waylaying Pirates is just a good blocker and taps stuff down.
Now, I look at the commons and I see that we have extremely limited removal in the common slot. Do you have any concerns with that?
I have concerns with the removal abundance in this set overall, but especially in this set with this archetype, you really just have to. It's not necessarily a problem. You just have to be able to prioritize your threat assessments. You have to be able to know what cards are worth a pacifism or ones you can just bounce or maybe take a few hits for. So you always have to assume that they have a bomb in their deck. So you have to know what your outs are for each card they could have and just play it accordingly.
Fair. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about the uncommons here and see what we got for the top 10.
Okay, uncommons here. Master's Guide's Mural is one of my favorite cards in this set. I thought this was going to be a little too expensive to actually get going, but it really isn't. And a stream of 4/4s is exactly where I want to be in this format. This thing is a lot easier to trigger than you would think, so it literally will turn into a stream of 4/4s if your deck is built correctly. Zoetic Glyph, it comes into this one, but it's really good in blue-red where you're a little more aggressive. But this thing, if you don't get the thing blown out when you try and cast it, you just get value city. This thing, it turns a random treasure or one of your Tinker's Totes into a 5/4, and then when it dies, you get to discover and you get a re-add to the board. Very, very good card. If it sticks, you have to make sure that you play it on curve. Lodestone Needle is very, very annoying to deal with. A lot of the times, the stun cards in a lot of these formats are not that impressive, but this one actually pulls its weight. It's cheap. Having flash matters a lot, and then the backside actually can randomly start exploring later in the game, so you can turn one of your early guys into a thing to kill them with. Spyglass Siren, I normally don't like flying men, but this thing comes with a map token, and that map token is going to be craft fodder later in the game, or you can randomly make this into a 2/2, or make sure you keep hitting your land drop. So this is the one drop you want to play. Eaten by Piranhas, it's kind of your best removal spell that'll actually result in killing something. When they attack in, you can flash it in, you can shrink a dinosaur, and then eat it with one of your guys in play. Dusk Rose Reliquary, Oblivion Rings are always good. This one's a little more tricky, so having the fodder of like a Tinker's Toad or a map token makes this downside not really a downside. Clay Fired Bricks, one of my favorite cards in the set, hitting your land drops, and when this thing flips over, we'll see it later, it's a glorious anthem that makes more blockers. It's wonderful. Mischievous Pup can save a creature or get value from things later. Spring Loaded Saw Blades is one of your better removal spells that actually kills as well, so there's a priority. And the 1/1 Lifelinker wears Explorers very well. If this is a 2/2 flyer, it's very good.
So in a grindy deck, I'm seeing that for uncommons, we have two 1/1 flyers. Even though this is just kind of a grindy, let's go up the curve deck. What's the significance of these flyers?
The significance of the flyers is because they wear explorers very well. If you can turn these into a 2/2 flying lifelink, like I said, you're taxing the removal spells, and if they have to abrade that, which they probably will, then they're not going to be able to shatter your mural or do something else to your bigger 6/6 later in the game. So, and the Siren making a map token is kind of what I want to be doing anyway. A honorable mention in this deck is the 3/3 for 2 that can't attack unless you have an artifact enter play. It's a roadblock. It trades early, it sits there, and they don't want to kill it, but they have to. And if not, it'll probably trade with something else. But the 1/1s are just really annoying to deal with, and I've gotten more value out of those over time.
Fair. Well, let's move it along and talk about the rares and the mythics.
hmm So rares, the first one is one that I'm sure a lot of you have lost to and sealed. This card is almost unbeatable. Thank goodness you can actually you can interact with it when it comes in or with the triggers on the stack. We have found out at the release we didn't think we could do that, but this thing comes down for 7 and it makes 3 1/1s. The dirty part about this is that if it lives, you can untap, you can eat those 3 1/1s, attack, and make 6 1/1s, and it keeps going up the chain every time it attacks. This thing is stupidly powerful, and if you're able to bring it back, it's even better. Again, the gods are just good in general. These are two of the better ones. Rebound, if you haven't played it before, your instance, when they cast, if they resolve, guess what? You get to do it again on your next turn. So you get double value from any of your instant speed, bounce, or removal spells. Very, very good card. Plus on rate. The white one is just a 6/6 for 6 vigilance that if it comes back, it's just better than most. Akai Pakal. This card I didn't necessarily think was going to be overpowering early on. I was wrong. This card is basically a free sleight of hand every turn. You have, especially in this deck, you have an artifact coming in every turn, and then you just get card quality over and over and over again. And remember, if you bin an extra artifact, you can craft out of your graveyard, everybody. So this is just value city. Thousand Moon Smythe, for those of you who love Urza Saga, hey, we have one in limited. This thing is kind of mural on steroids. So if you can get this and flip it, it's actually easier than you think to flip it. This thing just makes gnomes that scale for how many things you have in play. Very, very good. Malcolm is just a very good card. Early flash flyer. The flash is kind of irrelevant in this deck, but being able to loot and fix your draws, and then later you could even cheat a Thunder Hulk or something big into play once it hits the fourth counter. Get Lost is just a solid removal spell. A lot of people don't have time to take advantage of the map tokens. The Warden, the Scooter, and the Larcenist are all very good, but the Larcenist can actually nullify a bomb by turning it into a treasure, assuming that this thing survives.
Now, looking at that top 10 list, which of them, in your opinion, pushes you the hardest into committing to Azorius Craft on that pack 2 pick 1 scenario?
As far as rares go, either the Thunder Hulk or that, but the mural is kind of where my mind goes immediately. I just want to play craft, but without the murals, the top end is not as fun as it could be. The mural decks are so much easier to win with, so that's what I want to see.
Fair. Well, let's move it along and let's talk about some of the traps that we are going to see in here, because there are a few.
There are a few. So again, these cards are just, they don't really do very much. Family Reunion, if you're going to play it at all, you're going to be playing it in Boros, where you're going to be going a lot wider with things like that. Giving your things hexproof, you don't really have any bombs you necessarily have to protect that are creatures anyway, so this card doesn't really pull its weight. Might of the Ancestors, again, more of a Boros card than this. You're not going to be attacking wide with a lot of stuff. You're going to be nickel and diming them and then killing them over time. So I don't really have a lot of value in this. Archaeologist is a 23rd, 24th card. I'll play it if I have to, just for the scry being able to return an artifact. If you have some bombs that you need to protect, this is as close to a raised as you're going to get, so it might come off this list. But the draw 3 pitch a card, I really haven't been impressed with them the last few sets, but they keep making them. So Relics Roar, a little too hard to get this stuff going. There was a card a few sets back that actually turned something into like a 4/4 or a 5/5 at instant speed, so you could eat a lot more stuff. But a 4/3, you're going to be trading stuff. So unless you have a lot of maps around, it doesn't really pull its weight. Hurl into History. I'm with LSV on this one. He's been burned by this too many times that we just don't play it anymore. It's very hard to have your opponent play their bomb into it, especially when you pass not doing anything. This deck is built around committing to the board, and if you just pass with 5 mana up, a good opponent will just simply pass back or play something that you're going to get 1 or 2 discover off of it. You're never going to get a 6 or 7 unless they're really far behind. So don't really like that card. Soaring Sandwing falls into the land cycling ability. 6 mana for a 3/5, not really where I want to be. I would rather play a 1 or 2 or 3 drop that gives me value, and I have other cards to make sure I hit my land drops, so this isn't really where you want to be either.
Now, I looked at the cards here, and 4 of them discuss history, ancestors, and family, and yet all 4 seem to be on the trap list. Is this a coincidence?
It's very possible. I think R&D just got lazy with naming them, or maybe it was a sign that we picked up on early, so everyone wins.
I found it intriguing that Family Reunion was a card that's basically unplayable.
Yes, yeah. Boros has not impressed me yet, but you never know. It could turn out to be good later, but it hasn't impressed me yet.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, let's move over and do the signposts here. The cards that are going to shove you into these archetypes.
You bet. So first things first, Thousand Moon Smithy. This is Mural on steroids. If I see this, Windmill Slam, we're going all in. Second is Master Guide Mural. This is where you really want to be with this. And the Signpost Spring Loaded Saw Blades is custom built for this deck. The clay-fired bricks, we haven't seen the other half of it, but it does flip it into a glorious anthem, so it pumps all of your guys +1/+1, and it also comes with 2 gnomes that become 2/2s as a result of it. So this thing does everything early in the game. Tinker's Tote, it's really where you have to have this early to kind of melt everything together. It's the glue of your deck. Schooner really shines in decks like this because you've got a lot of early guys that will just explore everything that crews this. You can turn your 1/1s into 2/2s and 3/3s. A Call really shines in this deck, so this is kind of where you want to be with it. And Unstable Glyph Bridge did not make our top 10 list for the artifacts, but this is still a very good card that really shines in a deck like this because of the craft synergies. Unfortunately, I've seen more often than not that this actually kills a lot of our stuff too. We don't have a lot of little guys that are going to be hanging around, especially with 3/3s and 4/4s and things like that. And the tokens are going to be traded off early. So we don't, this isn't really the catch up card I want it to be. But if you're really in a bind, if you're just staring at dinosaurs and they're not attacking you for some reason, then this card can shine. But I really haven't been that impressed with it yet.
So, looking at these signpost cards, do you think any other archetypes share some of these signpost cards, and that's of concern?
Oh, 100%. But unfortunately, like Akai is good in artifact deck in general. The Schooner will also be played in that. Blue-red is the deck that everyone's fighting over right now. So if you get one of these, great. If you don't get them, it's not the end of the world because you've got a lot of the other cards like the totes and the bricks and things like that that only you can really play. Even the other white-based decks, the white, black, white, red, they're not going to be playing a lot of the bricks, a lot of the totes. They don't have a lot of value out of it. And the black, white sack deck really isn't good. So if they're taking them, fine.
Fair, fair. And that concludes our Week 2 draft guide covering the meta and Azorius Craft. Comment below, let us know your thoughts. And while you're down there, please remember to like, subscribe, and share us with all of your friends. We even have a join button for those who can afford to support the Rebellion for just 99 cents a month.
Tune in next week as we break down another viable archetype in Ixalan draft.
And until next time, untap, upkeep, resist.